Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and I'm sure there's several of you who know exactly what I'm going to talk about in this video. Pete. You have gone and said some things, haven't you? In case you may not know, Pete Hines has done an 80-minute long interview which was posted in the last day or so. The interview that was done with Greg Miller. If you are not familiar with who Greg Miller is, let's just be polite and say that Mr. Miller has never really met a paid promotional sponsorship deal that he has not liked. He is well known and liked by the companies in the industry because he will help them promote virtually any game that comes down the line. So that is who Greg Miller is, and he is not afraid to say so. So I'm not talking out of turn when I say stuff like that. But so he did a promotional type of interview with Pete Hines where Pete was pretty much allowed to say a lot of nonsense, which didn't get any pushback in the interview. The only thing that was even remotely difficult that was asked of Pete during the interview is he was asked about the blacklisting of Kotaku, which Pete Hines outright refused to answer, just said, "I'm not answering that." So much for his being candid. Pete Hines always praised for being very open with his answers, but of course Pete didn't want to say anything about that. But Pete did have an awful lot to say about Fallout 76, and that's one of the things that I want to discuss. Now, I did want to move on from Fallout 76. I've been talking a lot about that this week, but this interview came out, and I have got to confront a couple of things that Pete said. Specifically, I'm sure many of you have heard this already, but specifically one of the more ridiculous comparisons that he made when he tried to outright compare paying customers with small children. Now, how did this come about? Well, you see, during the interview, Pete let it be known that he has been very upset and did not take it well at all that people over the last year and a half, specifically he was very upset about YouTubers who've been making videos calling him a liar. It's been very difficult for him to take. That's what Pete said. He's very upset about this. He doesn't like being called a liar because, you see, when Pete Hines says stuff about a game that he's marketing and it turns out later that it's complete nonsense and not true at all, Pete doesn't like to be called a liar for that because it apparently hurts his feelings. Now, there's an issue with this. So what Pete did, he tried to use a comparison here which is utterly ridiculous. He tried to say, if you're a parent, this is his literal comparison that he tried to make. He said, if you're a parent and you promise your kids that you're going to take them to Chuck E. Cheese and then you get sick and you can't take them to Chuck E. Cheese, have you lied to your children? And you see, Pete, there's a few issues with this. First off, paying customers aren't your children. I hope that even you, Pete Hines, don't expect money from your children when you take them to Chuck E. Cheese. See, you're doing a treat for your child. When you're selling a product, you're not doing us a favor. You're selling us something. We're buying something from you. It's a business relationship, not a parent-child relationship at all. So this nonsense comparison, which Greg Miller just lets you just traipse on by the graveyard whistling with that one, it doesn't hold any water whatsoever, Pete. So the situation that arises here is when you are entering into a business relationship with us, the customers, and you make certain promises time and time again, both in interviews and press releases and on Twitter, over and over again, over several months, and you in fact argue quite often with people online, on Twitter, and in virtually every single interview you did over the summer. You were very combative in a lot of your responses, addressing some of the criticisms and worries that people were having about Fallout 76 and the future of Fallout in general, and even Bethesda in general. And every time there was an interview, Pete was out there very adamantly making these statements, whether it was talking about the Atomic Shop, or whether it was talking about the beta period, or the PvP, or the future of Fallout 76 not being a battle royale or single player stuff, whatever it was. Every time Pete gave an answer, he kept giving the same answer over and over and over again. So he can't sit there now and try to act like, oh, well, this is just a big whoops-a-daisy. No, Pete. See, even if we want to use your ridiculous comparison, trying to compare us directly to small children, let's go ahead and use that for the sake of your own argument. And I'm going to humor you for just a second. So, if you're a parent, and most of the time,
you make a promise to your child, it does come true. And when you tell them you're going to do something, it does happen. That's one thing. And then if you one time get sick and what you said turned out to not be true, well, that'd be one thing. But in the case of you and Todd and Bethesda in general, that's not the case. See, you are constantly promising us that you're going to take us to Chuck E. Cheese. You're going to take us fishing. You're going to take us to the moon. You're going to take us to the mountains. See that mountain? You can go there. Now we're going to take you to the stars. Your company is constantly making promises. And during the marketing for Fallout 76, time and time again, things that you personally said turned out to not be true. Within 100 days of the game coming out, you guys were going back on some of this stuff. Going back, you announced the Nuclear Winter, which is a battle royale, which you went back on within 100 days of the game launching. You started going back on cosmetics. Almost right away, you were selling non-cosmetic only items, which you said time and time again, and you had a chorus of people getting into the comment sections and getting mad at people who were saying that it probably wasn't going to be true. And you had people getting all upset about it. And all that turned out to be a lie. So when people call you a liar, it's because it happens all the time with you and Bethesda. And you say your feelings got hurt. I understand, certainly it's not on the same scale, but when you were out there telling all your lies about Fallout 76, I was here trying to make videos pointing out that you were lying at the time and pointing out past lies that you had made while marketing other games in the past. And people were calling me a liar online. I know, it's crazy. People were calling me all sorts of names in the comments. So I know what it's like, Pete. Again, it's different for me. I had several hundred, maybe a bit over 1,000 people at any given time yelling at me in the comments. And you probably had hundreds of thousands of people getting mad at you. I get it. The scale's quite different, but I understand the notion. I certainly do. I know it's not nice when people get after you online, but the fact is you put yourself in a position, I'm sure you're very well compensated, and your job is to take the slings and arrows for these companies. Now, some people try to let you off the hook, but the fact is you took that job and you stay in that job, and you continually go out there and misrepresent your products to the public, and I'm sorry, you don't get to fall back and turtle into your shell and act like it's everyone being mean and picking on you. But that's what Bethesda likes to do. And in this interview, Pete Hines, over and over again, proved that he and Bethesda have learned nothing about the failure of Fallout 76, which we knew all along. And I feel that obviously we're beating a dead horse at this point, but because of this interview, I had to combat this nonsense, because the interviewer himself did nothing of the sort, didn't push back against Pete Hines in any way, shape, or form. So someone's got to do it, because this is such obvious nonsense. Pete, we aren't your children. As much as you in the industry likes to pretend that paying customers are our children, we're not. This is a business relationship, and you guys have constantly lied. It's not just Bethesda. We all know that. But enough is enough. We aren't children. We have money. We're the ones at the end of the day keeping you afloat, because if we stop buying your games, the investors stop investing in your next product. And you know it. And we're not stupid enough that we don't know it. And we know that Fallout 76 is not the success that you like to think it is. And sure, you hornswoggled a bunch of people into buying the Fallout 1 subscription, but that's a different story for another day. He said a lot about the Fallout 1 subscription in this article, or in this interview, which I could go into as well. In 80 minutes, Pete did say an awful lot of things that I'd love to dive into. But the fact is, I want to keep this on customer relations, and especially paying customers, because Pete kept harping about paying customers. And that's the comparison he tried to make, comparing paying customers to children. And then he went on, and he was asked about where he accepts criticism from and who he listens to. And of course, we know the truth already, but Pete said right out, well, he likes to listen to people involved in the subreddit who play the game, people who have actually bought the game and have played the game, and he doesn't want to listen to the criticism of anybody else. So I guess, all the customers that they've alienated, people who have bought their games over the years. Maybe they've played Daggerfall and Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim. Maybe they dabbled in Elder Scrolls Online and have a couple maxed out characters. Maybe they played Fallout 3 and got into Fallout New Vegas and played a lot of hours of Fallout 4. And then maybe even bought Fallout 76. Do those people not count as paying customers just because they're not always playing Fallout 76 because maybe they have other stuff to do? Maybe there's better games to play and less waste of a time that they could have with their precious recreational time than wasting time on a broken product that has hackers galore on PC and constant problems with every update they put out and has not put out a major expansion in almost a year and a half since the game launched, and is finally now starting to listen to their customers almost 2 full years after the game was announced, when they've been having feedback all this time. They're finally getting around. This is another No Man's Sky scenario. And yet Pete doesn't like it when people call him a liar. Well, I'm sorry, Pete, but when you lie to people during a business relationship and then you pull the rug out from under them after you take their money, you are a liar. And if people call you that, they have every right to do so because that's what you've done. And you might not like it, it might hurt your feelings, but that doesn't really matter because it's still a fact. And you don't get to play the victim when you've been anything but truthful about this game, and when the game actually came out, by even the bought out gaming media standards, the game was a disaster. The review scores were the worst we've seen in the entire generation. Worse than even Anthem. The game was a disaster at launch. And Bethesda still does not want to admit the level and depth of the problem with Fallout 76. And now it's been 18 months almost since the game came out, a year and a half, and they still want to they're still trying to play the victim and act like somehow it's the fault of YouTubers that the game was unsuccessful, or that people not giving the game a fair chance. I'm sorry. It's not a question of people not knowing what the game was or not getting what they wanted. It's a matter of you selling a broken product and lying about it for years. If you don't want to wear the label, maybe you shouldn't have the job anymore. Because if the job is lying, and a lot of people try to excuse it all and say it's not your fault, it's coming from ZeniMax. Well, if it's really bothering you that much, then maybe it's not a good job for you, Pete. But the fact is, you are one of the most argumentative public relations people in the business, across any industry. It's very, very rare to see a public relations, supposed master of communications that you're supposed to be, who is so divisive among the community. People who are fans of Bethesda, by and large, don't like Pete Hines a lot of the time because he comes across as someone who is disingenuous. And he has been proven time and time again to be so. Pete says he only wants to listen to people who have bought the game, people who have played the game. Well, Pete, I bought the game when it launched. I paid $60. I knew full well what it was going to be, so I wasn't upset. I knew it was going to be a disaster, but I paid the $60. What'd you do with that money? Does my $60 not count? Am I not a paying customer? Because I'm pretty sure you took my $60. What about every time I've made a video where you got upset, where I called you a liar? What? Now, I'm not saying that Pete Hines has watched my videos. Obviously, I know I have a small channel, but say he had, for the sake of the argument. Pete, every time I make a video, I make sure I log in to capture some footage, and I usually play for about an hour so I can capture, 15, 20 minutes worth of footage. Does that play time not count? Am I not someone who's playing the game when I log in? I mean, over time, across accounts, I've put in over 100 hours. I know it's not the thousands of hours that some people have put in, but I've played the game. I've given you the engagement that you're so desperate for. Now, have I put any money into your atomic shop? No, so I've been a very naughty gamer. You might even call me a freeloader, despite the fact that I've paid for the game in full when it launched. But regardless, Pete, you say you only want to listen to paying customers? Well, I am that. And in fact, over the years, for Bethesda software published products, I have given you, I'm sure, over $1,000 of my own money buying your products over the years. So you say you don't want to listen to me because I called you a liar? So sorry, Pete, but I'm not really sorry at all. Because I've given evidence every time I've called you a liar personally here. And every time you continue to lie, I'll call you for it again. Anyway, that's it from me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel. Head forward, and as always, keep it turned to 11. Uncle Pete if you're out there, I know there's a lot of thumbnails. If you Google Pete Hines lies, I know a lot of my videos might pop up because you've lied a lot.